Okay. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Azren, the language nerd here. Hope you're doing very well on this fine Wednesday afternoon or whatever day and time it is for you right now as you're watching this video. This is episode number 68 of Azren's Journal. So if you're new to this segment on my channel, it's pretty straightforward. This is the part of my YouTube channel where I share my personal language learning journey and, of course, give you guys a whole bunch of different language learning tips. I have a really big one for you today. This is probably one of the most impactful things that I can remember sharing, at least of 2020. I think it's going to help a lot of you. And this is what I'm calling the on-off language learning strategy. Now, what does this mean? It's actually something I personally do, so you'll get a nice insight into my own language learning studies here as you watch this video. And it's going to be, I really feel it's going to be very, very impactful and helpful for so many language learners. So right off the bat, if you do find this is helpful or insightful or useful and you think it can help others, once you've actually finished watching, I would appreciate this particular video being shared with someone that you think it can help with, that you think it can help, whether it's on your own YouTube or Facebook or Snapchat or wherever, because I think it's a big one today. Now, the on-off cycle looks something like this. Basically, the premise is that you're going to go through, in an entire year, right? You're going to go through different points of time where you go into on cycles and off cycles. An on cycle is a period of time where you are diligently and consistently studying your target language. The off cycles is where you are just doing the bare minimum to maintain the level of fluency that you currently have. So, for example, I'm going to share I have it on my phone here. I want to share with everybody my on and off cycles for the year of 2019 and kind of what that looks like. So you can have a little bit of a concrete idea of someone who follows this kind of methodology and how I personally structure this methodology. So my cycles look something like this. My first on cycle was about January and February of 2019. In January and February of 2019, I attended Mandarin classes for 3 times a week. Each class was about 1 hour. I did 1 or 2 days of homework or studying throughout the week. So maybe I did some homework for the class or some personal study. I ran a weekly Mandarin conversation group that I was in charge of, that I currently am in charge of, in fact. I passively listened to Mandarin music on a daily basis, and occasionally I would look up lyrics to Mandarin songs. That was my first on cycle. I think anybody watching this can probably agree that's pretty intense. 3 days a week of class, 1 or 2 days of homework, a weekly Mandarin conversation group, listening to Mandarin music, looking up lyrics. Like, that's pretty intensive. That's especially if you have a full-time job and other responsibilities and a personal life. That's a very respectable amount of effort being put towards a language. Now, March until probably middle of May, so early March to middle of May, there's a month-and-a-half window there where I entered an off cycle, where I wasn't really feeling very motivated anymore, and I wasn't feeling very good about the language and didn't really want to put a crazy amount of effort into it. So my off cycle looked like this. I kept going to my classes, but to be honest, I wouldn't really listen. I would actually be working on work stuff in my class. So the teacher's teaching, and I'd be like on my computer typing whatever, replying to emails, and I was not really listening or really paying attention. I would even skip class sometimes. I wouldn't even attend all of the classes. I stopped doing homework, so I wasn't doing homework anymore. The only kind of stuff I did was when I had a test in my class, I would cram the night before for that test, or I would quickly maybe cobble together some homework sometimes. But I was not doing, in fact, I only got a C in that class because I realized at the end of the year that a homework, that's one group of assignments. There's like a bunch of little assignments that make a big assignment. It's a workbook. That's worth like 10% of the mark of our grade. I did like, I don't know, I got like 1 out of 10. Like I lost 9% of my grade for not doing that homework ever. So I just wasn't doing it. I continued listening to Mandarin songs, but I never looked up lyrics anymore. I just listened for pleasure. And I continued running my Mandarin conversation group. which is very casual, by the way. It's not really an active practice. I'll be honest, it's super casual. We're just basically a group of friends at this point. So it's super casual. Yeah. Now, mid-May to mid-June was very intense, and we started on cycle number 2. This is the second on cycle. I was in Taiwan. I had a Mandarin class daily for 2 hours. I taught 6 hours of English a week, but I taught it in Mandarin. I lived with a Taiwanese family, and they didn't really speak much English. I did an extra roughly hour of homework or extra studying per day. I attended weekly Mandarin meetups to practice my Mandarin. I continued to listen to music, and then I also learned at the time I was studying how to read traditional characters instead of just simplified. So now I can read both traditional and simplified reasonably comfortably, but I couldn't do that prior to my trip. So I had 1 month, which is very intensive. Then we started another off cycle, mid-June to late August. That's like, what is that? Month and a half. Is that right? Wait, mid-June, mid-July, mid-August. Oh, 2.5 months. Sorry. I started an off cycle where literally all I did, I listened passively to music and I ran my conversation group once a week. Nothing else. And then finally, from September to December, I started another on cycle where I attended a Mandarin class 3 times a week. I did about 1 day of homework or studying per week. I continued to run the Mandarin conversation group. I listened to Mandarin music passively on a daily basis. And I would occasionally look up some lyrics to different songs. So that was my 2019. Notice how there's points where it's super diligent and super consistent and lots of time and effort being put into the language. And then other points where I'm doing a little bit, I'm maintaining. I haven't completely let the language go and done zero, but like literally mid-June to late August is the best example. Running, and let me stress something here. Running the weekly Mandarin conversation group is not really an active practice. We speak a lot of it. We'll often speak a lot of English, not a lot of, it's super casual. So mid-June to late August, I was doing very, very little, right? So in my off cycles, I'm not doing that much. And I think this kind of on-off strategy can work for a lot of language learners. So as I said before, I would appreciate if you think this is a good idea, I would appreciate you sharing this with whoever on your Facebook. Maybe you message it to somebody. Maybe you share it on your Snapchat or Instagram, wherever you share it. I can help a lot of people. My favorite thing about this on-off strategy and going through on-off cycles is that you can time it with your motivation. You can really time it, because the reality is sometimes you are more motivated and sometimes you're less motivated. Just how it is. Me too, right? And so you can time it with motivation. You don't even have to plan out when your off and on cycles are. Not necessarily, right? Mine typically were, 2-month cycles for the most part, 2 to 3 month cycles for the most part. But my cycles line up with the school semesters, right? So my cycles are not really planned out. It just lines up with my class schedule, right? When I'm in classes, I'm on an on cycle. When I'm not in classes, I'm in an off cycle. And that's how my cycles are controlled. When I was traveling abroad, that becomes an on cycle. And so that's how it works personally for me. Some of you might not be in school in that fashion like I am. And so you might have to plan it out. But even then, that planning out might not be the best thing, because when you plan to start an on cycle, you might not really feel like starting an on cycle. So for many of you, especially if you enjoy learning languages, especially, you might want to be like, I'm feeling motivated. Okay, we're starting an on cycle. And then you go hard for that on cycle, and then you stop when you hit that off cycle, right? And the biggest key that I think matters for this on-off cycle strategy, at least for me anyway, is that in those off cycles, you cannot do nothing. You have to kind of maintain the language. You have to do something to maintain it. And in those on cycles, you have to use that to accelerate. You have to really progress in those on cycles. And if you do that, right, if you're maintaining in the off cycles and you're pushing forward in the on cycles, you will progress over time. And it's going to take away some of that mental pressure of when you don't feel like studying, you're like, oh, I don't feel like studying. I don't really want to do it. And then you have to force yourself. Well, that battle is now gone. You never have to force yourself. What you have to do is you have to understand that when you don't feel like doing it, That's cool. Go do something else. That's okay. When you feel like doing it, you have to go all in, and you have to really kind of be diligent in those moments. And in those off cycles, just do the bare minimum, maintain what you have, don't slide backwards. And in those on cycles, you push forward. I think that can work tremendously for you guys, and it'll work for a lot of people. Not everybody. That's not going to work for everybody, but for a lot of people, that's going to land and that's going to work. To give you some background of where this concept came from, it's a concept I personally follow for my languages. I didn't actively become aware of it until recently, actually, because I found that I actually actively and consciously use this strategy for health and nutrition, which is where this is kind of coming from, and where I become consciously aware that I actually run my life in that way in many respects. My life actually kind of works that way. Not just language learning, but many aspects of my life go through on and off cycles. And that's how I choose to run things. So in health, for example, my rule is the following. There's points like right now, I've just started another on cycle for my health. So what that means is I'm trying to become healthier. There's a bug down here. Anyway, I'm trying to become healthier. I'm going to eat better than I used to before. I'm going to exercise more than I used to. I'm going to learn more about health and nutrition and what the body needs, what I should be eating, what I shouldn't be eating. I'm going to learn about the effects of, I've headline reading, I've heard that Wi-Fi and technology has an effect on the body, but I haven't actually done proper research and read academic studies and really looked into it to see what happens. I'm going to learn about that. I'm going to really use this on cycle to move my health in a positive direction. And at some point, probably knowing myself, in the next 2 to 3 months, that initial energy is going to fade, or my focus is going to shift. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to an off cycle. Now, for health, it's a little bit different. I can't just start being completely unhealthy, but what I can do, and this is my rule for me, is when I enter an off cycle for health and nutrition, I have to be better. My health has to be better during that off cycle than my previous off cycle. So for my previous off cycle, like here's an extreme example. Actually, I'll give a real example. So for example, my previous off cycle, I just came off an off cycle. One thing I was doing is I was consistently paying attention to the quantity of food that I ate, the number of calories. I would pay attention to that even though I was on an off cycle. I paid attention to that, and I knew how much junk food and how many calories and the quantity of food. I was very aware of it. So the next time I'm in an off cycle, I have to minimally do that, right? I cannot slide backwards, right? And there's other things I do during off cycles too, but for time's sake, I won't share them. But every off cycle has to be a little bit better than the previous off cycle. And the on cycles also have to be previously better than my previous on cycle for health. So right now, I remember my previous on cycle when I was healthy, right? And I was doing health decisions. I was doing 5 days a week of roughly 45 minutes of daily exercise in the house and stretching daily. I was very consistent. I knew how the quantity of food I was eating. I knew I was not overeating. I was paying attention to what foods I ate. I knew I was eating enough vegetables and fruits, and I was paying attention. I was continuing to sleep. I was sleeping a good amount. I felt very good about the sleep. I had good quality of sleep, right? I was doing really, really good stuff. So this on cycle, those things, and for my health and nutrition are going to continue, and I'm adding something else. So I've been learning today, even today actually, I've been learning about not just, okay, eat fruits and vegetables, but what fruits and vegetables you have to eat and why. Not just eat protein, but did you know there's different types of protein? You've got complete proteins that have all 9 essential amino acids, and those all have different effects on the body. And there's also some foods that are incomplete proteins that have protein, but they don't have all 9 amino acids. And that's important to know, right? And now that I know that, I now understand what kinds of proteins I have to eat, right? Or understanding, and on and on and on. I'm learning more. So now on my next on cycle, I'm going to actually move forward, and I'm going to get even healthier than I was before. And when the off cycle comes, I'm going to choose. Some things I'll let go because I'm in an off cycle, and that's okay. Maybe I start eating more cake again and more junk food, no problem. But it's not going to be as bad as my off cycle, which ended basically yesterday. So I do it for health as well. I do it for languages. I do it for, a lot of different things, I find. And I think as I continue to think about it, I might even see this pattern in other aspects of my life. So anyway, I hope this was useful. Again, I would appreciate some shares, comments, likes. I feel like this is a very useful video for many people. This could really help a lot of people. So, you know, I really appreciate some shares on this video and giving it to other people. And yeah, we'll chat later. Bye-bye. See you.